Hello, this is Dr. Garrett Castleberry, Associate Professor, Program Director of Communication, Media, and Ethics at Mid-America Christian University. I'm here with another entry in our digital lecture series, an asynchronous dialogue where we draw upon students' questions from the readings, a weekly readings discussion questions assignment built in to help reward students for participating in those readings. It's an investment in the reading process. It's an investment in what the readings offer us. It's an investment in the students. A reward mechanism to enable, empower our ability to develop our minds, develop our awareness, information literacy. So these questions are tied to COM 2143, Digital Media Literacy. And I'm excited once again to turn to some student questions. We're looking at readings from week 2 of the course, as this course is powering along. And I'm excited to engage some of those questions each week. We don't necessarily have all the time to get to every question, but we try to comb through them and locate some of the sharpest questions, as well as in this instance, I tried to locate questions that had continuity between them. Right, I was sensing some synergy between the directions you all were taking your questions, and we're going to engage some of those now, and hopefully be able to engage in others at a later point. But let me jump into some questions from our week 2 readings. We're looking at Marcel Denise's Popular Culture Introductory Perspectives. There may be a couple of questions from Writing Well in the 21st Century from Linda Spencer. And we're not there yet, but when we get to that, starting in the 3rd week of the class, we break out Henry Jenkins, Sam Ford, and Joshua Green's Spreadable Media, Creating Value in a Network Society, Network Culture, one of those two. And so we also have questions. This group has been great about asking questions relating to tertiary readings or tertiary clips, short videos that we've embedded into our online modules for enhanced engagement of course themes. So let me jump into a couple of questions from Megan this week to kick us off. Megan asks, what are some ways you've seen consumers, quote unquote, buying culture? And a little bit of open interpretation here in terms of where we're drawing from for this question. But what are some ways I've seen consumers buying culture, so to speak? And I processed this for a little bit. I'd love to come up with a top 10 list, but that would take a little bit more time. But something topical. Let me think about topical examples here. A case study from our Spreadable Media book we'll get into shortly. There are some links within the book that give us an access to some online case studies. And one of those case studies, if I recall, looks at WWE. That is to say, right, World Wrestling Entertainment, formerly WWF, and how that company went through a multi-tiered restructuring and diversification of their output that coincided with launching their own streaming service, and you could access decades worth of archived content to your delight. But simultaneously, right, or perhaps in the years preceding the launch of this online network, the company went public. That is to say, it began to sell stock or be publicly traded, right, on the stock market. And so, thinking about an entertainment entity as something that people can, quote unquote, invest in. That is to say, not just invest with their leisurely time or maybe like their interest to buy a t-shirt here, buy what we used to call pay-per-view there, but literally buy into the company. That is to say, invest in stocks. That is a way of buying into the company of popular culture. a different example that I think of when I think about the actual process of buying into one's fandom would be the Green Bay Packers in professional football. The Green Bay Packers, if I'm not mistaken, a collectively owned team, a team that sells stock, and its fan base essentially co-owns the team. A very unique way to operate, and a way that they're able to be successful despite being in a very small market venue. But an additional example that I also thought of would be MAGA merch, right? MAGA being the recycled "Make America Great Again" slogan, right? A cycle that belonged to Reagan era political campaigning, but I'm going to use a term, and Megan uses this term in her writing this week. It was reappropriated, right? It was reinvented by the Trump campaign to sell, right, the vision that they had for the U.S. In the 2016 cycle, and then they kind of attempt to sequelize it in some ways half-heartedly, right? Because you're already in office. But there was attempts to recycle it in 2020. But along the way, it's like the signpost of merchandising, of political merchandising in the last 4 years, right? The red hat, all of the types of other cachet flags and whatnot. And I mean, this is not, independent distributors might be out there making some bank, right? Collecting coinage on these, but I'm definitely sure some of these political groups have copyrighted certain aspects of the material and thus sustain a profit, right? And so that's a way in which consumers buy culture, right? They're buying into their own participation of the political system or a spectator sport that they like, right? So therein we can see a couple of examples. Great question to start us off. A couple questions down, Megan writes, at what point do you feel we as a society transitioned from appreciation of cultures to monetization of them? And this is a deep cut. I love it. I love the thinking here and the pressing. And I'd start by saying commoditization of goods and services, of human labor, has existed in some form since societies shifted from agrarian cultures primarily toward those that engage in commerce, in trade. And so when you saw this shift from agrarian societies that would be very independently based, whether it's individuals, hunter and gathering, or communities that were able to settle into agrarian practices and processes, you would have individuals that developed an understanding of commerce, right? And we've been moving in that direction regionally, intercontinentally, and then ultimately globally, and now digitally as a result. And so that's kind of the wide angle way of suggesting that we've been commoditizing or transitioning and commoditizing culture for some time. But we can also at the same time look at the history of the United States in particular as a mega example, a superpower, if you will, of commerce, and perhaps that is the U.S.'s superpower, right? In superhero terms, right? Not just our nuclear capabilities, but the ways in which we prosper from banking on ideas and creating what we refer to as a free market society. And these free market philosophies, right? When we talk about political economics and the approaches that make that successful, we ultimately create culture. And if we kind of peel back the layers of the things we're interested in, take a closer examination of what that is, what it really represents, we have created a culture that is all inclusive of commoditization in various forms, right? And sometimes, in sensational ways, we see the uglier examples, but we also benefit from some of the more positive elements of that. So it does go both ways. All right, let's see. If we believe it is okay to monetize cultures, who do you think should receive the profit? If you don't support the monetization of cultures, explain your reasoning. All right, well, I won't play full devil's advocate on that one, but in terms of who should receive the profit, I would reply with a question, with a follow-up. Do we believe in trademarks and copyrights? And if so, we are thus buying into those rules as the mechanisms of free market governance. All right, and so if we're going to recognize that laws and regulations help to protect ideas, I've used the term IP, right, in reference to intellectual property, then we can appreciate how building these kinds of structures as an infrastructure, an economic infrastructure will help protect them. The tricky part is when you keep building onto it, it creates a very large, very messy system, and can be sometimes too costly to fully figure out, right? At least at an individual level. So commoditization is a tricky area, a great conversation to have. All right, let's see. Let's take a break there and reshuffle the deck here. I've got a few more questions, but I think they start to lead us in a different direction. So sit tight, and we'll come back with more Q&A right after this.